Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to show you my round 2 game from the Zagreb Cup, played in May, or it started in April actually. So in round 2 we were facing the weakest team in the tournament, and on board 2 I faced an opponent rated 1600. After round 1 we were in first place. So once again there are 5 rounds total in the tournament. Whoever wins the tournament qualifies for the finals of the Croatian Cup. I messed up round 1, I lost out of the opening. You can see the game in yesterday's video. It was awful. Okay, so I have to say I had no idea what my opponent plays, or at the time I had no idea, and I know the guy, but I don't know his openings or anything, and I didn't know that he was going to come and play, because each team has more than 4 players. It's played on 4 boards, but teams are maybe 6 or 7 people, and I didn't expect him to come and play. I was actually preparing for another opponent. So I played d4, and I wanted to keep things flexible. After d5, I played knight f3. I just wanted to see what sort of setup he goes for. Does he play knight f6, e6, c6, g6? Many things could happen from here. After e6, I was happy to see this, because it's not going to be a wild opening, and I just played g3. I wanted to play a Catalan of a sort, maybe with an early c4, maybe with bishop g2 first, but my opponent played c6, and now it's either going to be a closed Catalan or it's going to be a Stonewall, as well. That's what happened in the game. After bishop g2, my opponent played f5, and this is a pretty standard Stonewall now. I'm going to castle and play c4, and he's going to do the usual Stonewall stuff. So I castled first. He played knight f6, I played c4, he played bishop d6, and I played b3, which is the main line. Whoa, sorry, have to turn off the variation arrows. So in this position, b3 is a very strong strategic move, threatening to play bishop a3 and exchange the dark squared bishops. In the Stonewall, black has this awful bishop on c8, and the bishop on d6, along with the knight on f6, is what black usually uses to launch a Stonewall attack, and black definitely doesn't want to trade the bishop off. Sorry, I got disconnected. Let me just switch to my mobile network. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I do know what's going on. I'm on an island, and the internet connection is just very poor. So I want to go bishop a3. So if you don't know this position, and it's definitely theoretical, you can pause the video and try to figure out what black should do. Well, black should play queen e7, because queen e7 prevents bishop a3, and after queen e7, white goes bishop b2, black castles, knight bd2, and that's a normal position. I'm playing for the e5 square, and this is actually what I play against the Stonewall when I have black. When I have the Stonewall in reverse, I don't have time for b6, bishop a6, so this is what I usually get. However, after b3, my opponent just castled, and now white is significantly better. This is a big strategic mistake, because there's no way to avoid a bishop trade. After bishop a3, not that this is a bad bishop, but this is black's best piece. So after bishop a3, I'm forcing the trade, and black of course takes. I mean, there's no point in allowing me to take and developing my knight to the most natural square on c3. So takes, and now white has a simple plan. White wants to play knight c2, knight e1, knight d3, and fight for the e5 square, either preventing e5 or getting a knight into e5 and dominating black's position, which means that black is going to have to do something like bishop d7, bishop e8 to get the bishop somewhere active, but not really, because even if it reaches h5, it's really not a good piece. Queen e7 attacks the knight, that's fine. Knight wants to go to c2 anyway. Knight bd7, knight e1, and again the knight's coming to d3 and to e5, and I actually know this position because I've been preparing my white repertoire in the main lines a lot recently, and this has been played 20 or so times, and the best way for black to play is dc, bc, and then e5, sort of liquidating the center. And of course white's going to be left with a weakness on c4, black's going to be left with a weakness on f5, but it's playable. So after d5, knight e5, knight e5, queen e5, knight d3, white should be better, but not much. Not much better, because the bishop is going to be active, and it's going to be playable. However, after knight e1, my opponent played e5 immediately, and without the trade on c4, this simply doesn't work, because I'm going to take on d5, and black's going to be left with another major weakness. So black's going to be left with the structure d5, f5, and the e and c pawns are going to disappear, and that's going to be very, very hard to defend. I'm going to have a square on d4 and a square on f4. So no calculation needed, really. I just exchange everything, create a weakness, and play on from there. So d5, doesn't matter what my opponent does from here. He has to take the pawn, first of all. Takes, queen e5, and now cd5. And again, it doesn't matter what he takes with. If he takes with the knight, I'm just going to take. If he takes with the pawn, I'm going to set up a blockade early. So takes, and knight d3. Gaining a tempo on the queen moves away, and knight f4. Triple attacking the pawn. I want to go e3, I want to set up a blockade on d4, and just eventually win the pawn. Claim the c-file, get the other rook to d1, and it should be a simple game. White is much better here, simply because white has fewer weaknesses, white has amazing pieces, and the bishop on c8 is still bad, and the plans are easy. Get the queen to d4, blockade the pawn, get the rooks to c1, d1, and win some material. So rook d8 defending the pawn, queen d4 making sure the pawn can never move, bishop e6. I don't want to take that bishop is crap, so no. Rook f d1, the bishop dropped back to f7, rook a c1, preventing rook c8 because there would be too many attackers on d5. If rook c8 I take and take on d5. My opponent played b6 here, which I don't get. Maybe he was trying to prevent queen c5, but I don't really want to play queen c5. Now I want to play rook c6. So if I can play rook c6, I'm gonna win. So I just played rook c2. b6 gives away the c6 square. He played rook d7, defending the 7th rank, but I don't want to come into c7, I want to come into c6. So rook dc1, and now this is a major threat. And in some cases I can even just take on f6 and take twice. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew that rook c6 is a part of it. Rook a d8, and bishop h3 first, probing this weakness. g6 really isn't playable because of if g6, then rook c6 followed by queen f6 loses a piece. What else can you do? Well, I don't know. Maybe knight g4 is playable, but in any case, he played bishop g6. And now I was kind of afraid of queen a3. So instead of playing rook c6 first, I'd played b4, which is okay. White is still better, but rook c6 is just winning. So rook c6, queen e7 is the most sensible. Queen a3 is bad. I just doesn't work because I can go knight e6 and knight g7 and take on f6. So queen a3 really does nothing because knight e6 comes with tempo. Rook e8, knight g7, and black resigns. That's just the end of the game. If rook g7, queen f6, if king g7, queen f6, no point playing from there. My pieces are too active. And on rook c6, if queen e7, still defending the knight, then I can go rook e6, and after queen a3, for example, I can just defend and my pieces are in. This is still winning for white. My pieces are too good. But I played b4. I wanted to prevent an infiltration, and this loses some of my advantage, but my position is still better. I apologize for the noises. I'm outside on the terrace, and the village seems to be waking up. It's about 6 AM. Okay, my opponent played rook e8. I played rook c6 now. The queen came to e5, and I was really happy to exchange queens here. I don't see why not. Takes, rook takes, and e3. Here he made a mistake. he should have gone d4, even though it loses a pawn long term. But it's much better to lose the pawn than to allow knight e2, knight d4, setting up a blockade and double attacking f5. So he should have gone d4, and I can go rook c8. King f7 is playable, but let's say rook e8, which is better. Rook e8 takes, knight takes, and rook d1. And I'm just gonna win the pawn. The pawn cannot advance because I would take it. It cannot take because the rook's hanging. So let's say knight c7, I just take and I'm a pawn up. So on e3 he should have gone d4, but he played king f7, and now it's really simple. Knight e2, d4 cannot be played. h6, he wanted to reroute the bishop to g8, which is understandable, the bishop is garbage. Knight d4, I'm on f5 now. Bishop h7, and rook c7 was the simplest win I could see. At this point, one guy in the other match had his phone ring for the second time, and none of us could understand why the arbiter didn't just forfeit him when the phone rang the first time. His excuse was, well, the phone was away, like 2 meters away, and he said, I'm not using the phone. And the arbiter said, just turn it off. And the guy didn't turn it off. And then it rang again, it vibrated, and the arbiter just had him sign the score sheets. And the guy argued with the arbiter, so none of us could really understand why this was happening. If your phone vibrates, you just lose the game, that's it. So a weird situation. And I remember at this point I was trying to calculate rook c7. We had like a 5-minute disturbance where the guy whose phone vibrated was arguing with the arbiter that he shouldn't lose the game. Anyway, I got distracted. So rook c7 was as far as I could go. I didn't even look for other candidate moves because this seemed to win material. I couldn't see a good response. Rook e7 is what my opponent played. It's very hard to suggest an alternative. So yeah, he played this defending the rook. I played rook d7. If rook d7, I take on f5. If knight d7, which he did play, I take on f5. I took with the bishop, because why not? He exchanged, knight takes, he played rook e5, and now I'm winning with rook c7. That's just the simplest win. I want to trade knights, and the rook endgame is absolutely over. King e6, I go knight d4. So he took on f5, I took on d7, he played king g6, I took on a7, and now I'm just a million pawns up, and I have to win the game. Rook f6, b5, I want to fix the weakness and play rook c7, rook c6, and queen my pawn. h5, h4, I don't want to allow h4, there's no need to rush. King h6, I played rook d7 because I can win another pawn. If rook f5, then rook d6. He played g5, okay, takes, takes, takes. King g4, king g2, h4, and f3 was the final move of the game. It's mate, or he has to give up the rook. If rook f3, then rook d4 just wins the whole rook, so here he resigned. So the second round game was a bit smoother than the first round game. I mean, if you're gonna play the Stonewall, you really shouldn't allow bishop a3. And after that, it was tough to play. So that's all I can say. The next round was absolutely mad. I think the next round game is one of the messiest games I've ever played. And even though it was 20-something moves, it was... I hope you watch it. I just hope you see the next game. Yeah, I'm not gonna say anything else. In any case, after 2 rounds, we were in first place. And there was a 2-week break, or a week's break, between the first 2 rounds and the last 3 rounds. And as you may know, Lucia and I had been living in France for a couple of months. At this point, while I was playing rounds 1 and 2, she had already gone to France. And in between the rounds, I joined her. There's a guy riding a really loud motorcycle at 6 AM. I don't know why. I'm sorry. So in between the rounds, I've gone to France, and when I came back, I played round 3. So I'm going to show you that game. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.